Welcome to Drinking on the Edge. I'm David Fuhr, your host, and joining me today on this episode about Vermouth di Torino is its president, the consortio's president, that is, Roberto Bava, whose name might be a bit more familiar to my listeners as associated with his family estate winery in Piedmont, Italy. Welcome, Roberto.
Oh, it's in English. Hello.
Welcome. Well, Roberto is a very well-traveled fellow, and we've been acquainted a good many years. And today, his family's wines are certainly worth checking out, and they're widely available throughout the U.S. and the world. However, again, we're here to talk about this category of vermouths entitled Vermouth di Torino. And Roberto, if you can just provide us some context, what is Vermouth di Torino, and where does it rise up? Is it a new thing? Is historic?
Legally, it's what we call in Europe an aromatized wine. So the name itself tells you that there's a big majority of it is wine. By law, 75% is wine, with an addition of tincture made by herbs, spices, flowers. We call it the droge the old way, but technically botanicals. And plus sugar according to the category. In the group, there's several types or subcategory, but in the family, the better known is Vermouth. And the one with the identity and protection is Vermouth di Torino, the only one. Of course, you may have Lug or blue wine, you may have Sangria, you may have Chinato or China product, and Americano, etc. All of those have 75% wine. But Vermouth di Torino is the one with the appellation, and it's today's aperitivo.
What led to this, what I know to be the recent establishment, relatively speaking, historically relatively recent, the recent establishment of this official designation for Vermouth di Torino?
Of course, you were asking about the history. The history is quite far away because the category of aromatized wine is back to ancient Greeks, the Romans, etc., even pharmacology, the Tuscan monks, etc. But what we consider the modern vermouth is only 3 centuries old. This is where we have the first signal written which is a German name given to an Italian. Italy was not born even at that time, we talk about the 1700s, but technically this was the welcome drink in the royal cart of the Savoy family. It's important, this side of the history, because the two capitals of the Savoy, first it was a duchy, Ducato, and then became a kingdom. The first one was Chambéry and then became Torino later on. And those two capitals, those two cities were historically linked to the two categories of vermouth, Vermouth di Chambéry and Vermouth di. So then we split, and what was called the Kingdom of Vermouth, I like to call it like this, became a part of France and on the right side part of the new Italy.
And this dates to what year, more or less?
1861.
It's a very momentous year on both sides of the Atlantic.
Okay. Yeah, this is when Italy was born. Yes. Technically, the royal family of Savoy was given the permit to grab the rest of Italy, push out the Pope, the Sicilia, the Bourbons, etc., and the Austrian, giving back the Savoy and the Nice Riviera. So it was a sacrifice because actually in Torino we still feel being a kind of a kingdom, even if we are a republic. But this is linked to what we are talking about, and we'll be back to this story. So the modern vermouth was born in the royal cart. It was the first, there were no Facebook at the time. So the royal cart were the network where a lot of things spread around at the time, including chocolate, including coffee, and so on. By the way, Turin is also a chocolate and coffee town.
Yes, we'll get to that shortly as well. Having visited once, I was very impressed by the cafe culture that exists there. But back to you made a passing mention of the German origin of the word vermouth making its way to become vermouth, and that is linked to the herb wormwood, of course. And this wormwood, which is pretty common throughout the world, certainly in Europe, it finds its way into Vermouth di Torino as well?
That's what defines the category Vermouth. And Vermouth di Torino, by law, need to have that component as the main botanic bitter factor. And I can tell you that you need to have 0.5 grams per liter. Seems to be tiny, but it's quite bitter.
I've picked it wild and made tea from it. I can attest to that as well, yes. Are there any other botanicals that are required to be part of Vermouth di Torino?
Remember, it's wine, but recipe makes a huge difference from the other side world of wine. Part of these botanical were native and still are native. I'd like to mention menta, peppermint is one. We have several. Gentiana caulis, the blue flowers, etc. Angelica. Remember, we are a mountain area with flatland and several biotypes of botanicals here. So in spite of not being exotic and tropical, we have really a lot of different plants. Of course, Vermouth di Torino also include exotics, botanical, and this was key to make of it an incredible balanced product. History brings us back to Genova, the port of Genova, and all the spices coming up north through the railway. Normally, the old recipe have more than 20 botanicals in it. Back to the question, the Artemisia, the wormwood, whether it is Absinthium or Pontica, the two allowed, need to be from Piedmont because it's different. So there are hundreds of wormwood around the world, but the Piedmontese wormwood is different. By the way, even the white truffle are different in Piemonte, and the hazelnut are different. So it makes sense.
So just quickly to sew it up, the aforementioned botanicals are required to be part of a recipe. Are there any others that are part of the baseline, shall we say, recipe herbs?
Yeah. When you read Superiore, so Vermouth di Torino Superiore, require you to have at least three, let's make it simple, three local herbs grown in Piemonte. And again, it could be mint, it could be angelica, it could be several. Now, even rhubarb is going to be grown in Piemonte. There's a new cultivation of it. So at least three when you are Superiore.
And this recent establishment, can you, because I was there before, I mean, we visited in Asti. I remember visiting you in the 2000s, back when I was living in London, to do a story about the wines of your region. And you took me for a stroll in the center of Asti. And looking, of course, the famous beautiful tower there, you showed me this bar that had fallen on its heels. It was not in business at the moment. And you had expressed some interest that you're looking to revive this vermouth bar and maybe even produce a vermouth yourself. That's how far back it was. And out of that, slowly grew your brand of Cocchi, and subsequent to that, the establishment of this appellation, this consorzio. So can you walk us through, please, a bit of a timeline of your renewing your acquaintance or reestablishing this for the general public into making a real show of something that has existed, as you well pointed out, for hundreds of years?
Seen from today, we talk about only 12, 13 years ago. It looks like a century, actually. Everything was been going so fast. But at that time, vermouth was commodities. It was vermouth. What do you want? It's a vermouth. There's so many categories like this. And I was very keen on being a wine producer, on making a pyramid, because it cannot be all vermouth. There must be something better. There must be appellation. There must be origin, which is also the only way you can defend and protect sometimes an identity. So I was able to put together the industry. And at the beginning, it was a little difficult because the more you raise the level, the more the price is going up. So there were some, should we do it, etc., etc. But at the very end, after 2 or 3 years, we were able to put together also the Institute of Vermouth with the aim to write the law to defend Vermouth di Torino. And like a miracle, we did it because in the group there's the big guys, there are the small guys, the old guys, the younger guys. Every producer was involved with a very democratic way. And again, the miracle is that everybody was together saying we need to raise the quality of the product. It doesn't happen always in the industry. It's not that automatic. I'm in love thinking about how we did it, how there were like friends or a friendly attitude, not like enemies, my interest against yours, etc. So this is why the Vermouth started a brilliant growth. And step by step, we put together all the pieces of the painting, reaching, first of all, the Italian law of protection that then became the European law for Vermouth di Torino, and et cetera, et cetera. This is where we are. And if you want numbers, if you want stories about this, I can give it to you, of course. I'll tell you that in 4 years, we doubled the production. The perception of the quality increased so much. Even, of course, the price. Price 5-6 years ago were around like 12 or 13 unit on the shelves, whether it is euro or dollar or whatever, pound. And now they're around average at 24, 25.
Yeah, you're speaking now of the category, not your own brand necessarily.
No, I'm speaking about the category Di Torino.
Very good.
Which opposite to the simple Vermouth. So it was understood, given a credit to the work and the appellation Di Torino.
Now, you started to put this all together. How many producers of commercially available vermouth from your area were in existence? How many different brands were making vermouth when you just began this project?
We were 17, 17, and today we are 40, 45.
That's fantastic, and 40 of which are full-blown members. I think you have another 5 in line to join. That's great. So it shows a marked expansion in a very short period of time if that many brands are getting into the category. So you've succeeded tremendously, I would say, you and your colleagues there at the Consorzio Vermouth di Torino. And in case I forget later, please, it's vermouthditorino.org.
Yes, vermouthditorino.org. That's a simple page, but you got everything, producer, the law, etc.
And it's available both it's in Italian and in English both.
Sorry, every single producer, of course, has its own webpage. You can link to it, and there are different complexity or being simple according to your story. There are old producer, young producer, etc., etc.
How do today's Vermouth di Torino's the various expressions, how do they differ for someone who's a vermouth has some interest and maybe doesn't know everything? And how do your vermouths differ from other contemporary expressions? It's all artisan, but there are some big brands which we well know of, Italian, French typically. But as far as artisan vermouths are concerned, how does the Vermouth di Torino style, for lack of a better term, differ from that of somebody making a vermouth here in the U.S.? There's a handful of artisan producers here in the U.S. How does it differ from someone from South Africa making a vermouth and so on?
Step one, in Vermouth di Torino, you have some guidelines in terms of color, sugar, etc., which helps the consumer. In a way, you may have a vermouth extra dry, less than 30 grams per liter. You can have a dry, less than 50 grams. You can have a sweet, more than 130 grams. But also you go by color, bianco, rosso, rosé, ambrato, etc. So you can have a category so to name the one you prefer or to choose when you buy. And this is an help. What also makes Torino more precise, out there can be a jungle because you can have, if you have no rules, you can put anything. We always joke saying that you may have a vermouth alla banana, banana vermouth, but it will never be di Torino because banana is allowed. Okay. So it's safe to say that there are some unknown.
So the geographic location plays a significant role. I would say perhaps the greatest significant role for that. As well, the wine, the 75%, the minimum of wine, must be wine from Piedmont.
Italy.
In Italy,
must be
excuse
white.
me.
But in case of Superiore,
Ah,
need to be 50% Piemonte.
okay. Thank you
Now,
for that.
this was an interesting question we had to answer. Should we do 100% Piemonte, et cetera, et cetera? And then the point was that historically, because this is history, it's all about history, Torino was made with Italian good wine. Traditionally, even from Sicily, from Emilia-Romagna, etc. So technically, it was accepted to be tradition. But also, one of the reasons why we don't force the producer to do 100% Piemonte wine is that Piemonte is the most peculiar of the wine producing region because we have 100% of our wine are DOC or DOCG, which means that there's no one wine left. We are now roughly 6 million bottles. Now, if I would ask to do, okay, you can only use, let's say, Gavi. Actually, you steal half of the production of Gavi to make Vermouth. So maybe you shouldn't. You wanted to use Moscato, there's a little more, but you would in any way cut away 10% of the production of Asti, or even more. So this was one of the questions.
I see that some of your members are using Cortese for their white vermouths. I see.
Yeah, can be Cortese, can be a Valucine, can be a Mace, etc. There's no limit. You may mention the DOC in case you want to use a DOC wine, but it need to be at least 20% of it, minimum.
For
So
all.
if you mention
For all.
also made with Cortese or made with Herbalucci, what else? It need to be at least 20%. And of course, being protected, everything is traceable back to the register. So it's safe. If it is written, it is.
Does a Vermouth di Torino Rosso, must that be made with red wine or could be made with any color wine?
Historically, 99% of Vermouth Rosso are made with white wine.
Okay.
There's very few made with Rosso. You will find them a little more ruby, but traditionally they are made with white wine. Can be Moscato, what else?
Very good. I would think anything made with Moscato is going to carry over a lot of the Moscato character, the terpenes in the Muscat grape, and you're going to have a very specific type of.
Sometimes is a little too much. Actually, don't expect to see Moscato d'Asti as you taste it to go in Vermouth because normally you ferment the whole sugar, so it becomes a dry Moscato.
And before I get around to tasting here, please clarify for me, in generally, the extra dry or the Biancos, which is going to be drier onto the palate?
I would taste first the extra dry if you are following a sommelier rule.
Yes,
you start
please.
From the driest.
It's good to know. We're coached that the extra dry category is often applied to that of sparkling wines, and the confusion reigns with that being the fact that extra dry is actually sweeter than Brut. So thank you for clarifying that. So we'll taste the extra dries before the Biancos. What should the U.S. bartender and drinks aficionado know about the drinking culture of Torino in particular and Piemonte in general that could perhaps elevate their understanding of its vermouths? So again, if you can kind of expound a little bit upon the cultural link of between that of vermouths and other parts of drinking life in your region. You mentioned before coffee and chocolate. There must be some intersection of these different lovely tastes.
Interesting question, because I would go back to a little Italian anthropology, which is historically we drink neat. Until the 1900, Vermouth were drunk neat. Like we drink Amaro, wine, etc. The real mixology came from United States and London. So it's definitely something a little out of our tradition, but it was very well accepted. So if we go back to the early days and you consider vermouth like a liquid, like a wine, of course, if you pair it with food, you need to be aware of the bitterness because vermouth is bitter and of the sweetness. So once you link it to food or to something like this, you need to be aware of the category you're drinking. I see you are handing an extra dry there. There it would be potentially suitable to go with raw fish with oysters, etc. But you wouldn't drink a sweet vermouth with a carpaccio, a fish carpaccio. Also, if you want to use it like an ingredient in food, same story. If you consider that you concentrate the product by cooking, you also concentrate the bitterness of the sweetness. Back to the intersection in Piemonte, I would say that step one, if you are in Piedmont, I would love to have a hazelnut instead of peanuts with your cocktail. You are in the capital of hazelnuts and Nutella. So, yes, hazelnut is phenomenal with sweet vermouth. You want to go to chocolate, of course. You are in Torino. Torino is the capital of Gianduja chocolate and one of the world capital of quality chocolate. So, yes, in this case, I would go to a Ambrato, to a Vermouth Rosso. Which one? You have to taste.
Okay.
You have to have 5 or 6 Gianduja pralines and the 5 or 6 bottles, and you have the best evening with your friends you can imagine.
Well, we're going to set about tasting a little bit here. Get this moving along. I'm tasting first the La Canalese, extra dry. Yep, it's most certainly dry, and the bitterness there is very well balanced. Yes, you can detect a bit of sweetness, but how much that actually is sugar, it's hard to say. Ooh, are you familiar with La Canalese?
Yes, it's one of our member.
Yes.
It's in Canelli, of course.
And I have here also from Scarpa, their extra dry Superiore.
Yes.
So being a Superiore, I believe then that says that it must be at least 50% Piemontese wine?
50%. You may check on the back label. They may declare some of the grape.
While I'm tasting through these, if you could please share a little bit more about the coffee culture of Torino and how it intersects, perhaps, with the vermouth culture.
We were talking about the royal cards of Europe, where chocolate and coffee came first, and Torino was the capital. Vienna, Parigi, Napoli, all of those, Madrid, London, of course. So all of those are the first step of a network which will grow in the century. But probably some of the products you mentioned, including coffee and cocoa beans and vermouth, were more expensive than anything else. So they could spend more money to have those products. And yeah, the link with coffee is not that strong. It's maybe a little more with chocolate, but it's true that Torino is the mother place for Lavazza, for Vergnano, for Costa d'Oro, all of those good blend of coffee in Torino. And in spite of having no cultivation of coffee, but this is also happening for chocolate and something else. So what looks interesting is the know-how that Italians, and according to the area, are able to do, transform a product in a magic final product. And if you link coffee to vermouth, I only can imagine an espresso martini. Maestro Calabrese from London, he invented a bizarre way. I don't know if you have seen it. He used coffee in a mocha machine. He used vermouth instead of water, and it comes out a powerful ingredient to make a martini espresso.
Wow.
So that's something that immediately come in mind, but it's not that normal.
I have to say the Scarpa, it's worth mentioning, is an unfiltered vermouth and has a slightly cloudy appearance on their extra dry. And so be warned for anybody who purchases or is thinking about purchasing it. It should be faintly hazy. And unfortunately, no, they do not list on the back label which grape variety are being used or favored in that. So now I'm on to your brand, extra dry, the Koki.
There I know a little more, of course.
Please share.
The extra dry is the Superiore, even if it's not mentioned. It's 100% made with Cortese. Being Bava family also producing a very good Gavi since the 1950s. And the idea here was to make an extra dry different from the French side. Originally in the 1800, the dry vermouth was Chambéry, and Torino was the sweet vermouth. But in 1900, also Torino started to produce the other categories, including the Bianco. And here we wanted to do something specifically very Piedmontese. This is why you have Menta Piperita, you have Angelica from the Alps, and even lemon from Amalfi. So it's very Italian and very drinkable. That's the new frontier, a very drinkable dry vermouth.
It most certainly is. Great balance to it. And then lastly, I'll be tasting one from Antica Torino. And it's labeled dry, not extra dry, but dry.
So it can be a little softer. The dry and the extra dry are like a tool made really for the martini. The main consumption of this category is actually the martini. Some of the products are really devoted to be a part of the martini cocktail.
The extra touch of sweetness on there does it no harm. I would say there's a bit of a, let's say, almost a nice acidic finish to this Antica Torino. I hadn't anticipated by comparison to the previous ones as much as I enjoy them. The style that they've created here is quite separate, quite unique. And even though it seems soft at the beginning, and you're absolutely correct about that in terms of its approach, the finish, so we say, tightens up very much as well.
It's good to have a non-standard group of product in the Torino, because at the very end we give colors to the barman. He can take the one that better works for his idea on how to balance gin, vodka, etc., etc. I would see like one more opportunity to play with.
Yeah. Moving on to the Biancos, I poured the Bordiga.
So you move to the sweet one.
Yes, the sweeter ones, yes.
The sweet vermouth were the Bianco, made for a feminine consumption at that time, because the red wine tends to be very bitter at the beginning of the century, and for a more general public, not used to drink liqueur, this was more gentle. So the Bianco was really what was early spritz, let's say.
Okay, and following that, going back to like Lazy, their Bianco. Yep. Seems to be the same similar level of sweetness. Finish dries up on the end as well. And now I'm tasting a bottle of Luigi Vico, a brand that I recently became acquainted with, and their Bianco. I'm curious, are all these producers like you, are they also making wine on a commercial basis, table wine?
Actually, Vermouth producers are divided in groups according to their history and their production. There are specialists where they are producing, they are infusing, and producing the final bottles. And there are brands where you own the recipe and you go to a bespoke producer to make your own recipe. And this can be equal good. It's just a different way to manage. And in the consortium, we are brands and producer and owner of recipes. And even we have a botanical grower, because we are a vertical consortium. So even if you grow wormwood or mint or what else in Piedmont, you can enter the group.
Wow. Moving on to
being guaranteed, we need to trace back all the ingredients. So this is why you are a grower and your ingredients are like DOC herbs, something. Let's make it easy, but this is the way.
Good to know. And moving on to the Rossos, the Bordiga, by its appearance through a clear glass bottle, looks to be less red and more rosato, but that's just a stylistic decision that they make, I believe.
Yes. Every producer has its own idea on what should it be, what he likes sometimes, and how he wants to sell it in the market. And this doesn't happen to be always the same. Some of these, what you would say, super botanical, so a lot of aroma, etc. Some of these vermouth are more neutral, balanced, Some of the producers want to do cocktail with their product. Some of the producers are more in the wine side and they want you to drink it neat. Again, there's a great different strategies altogether.
Yeah, look, going to the Scarpa Rosso, they have said on the ingredient label, since you drew our attention to it earlier, Roberto, listed under ingredients is wine, sugar, natural extract of herbs and spices, caramel color added. And their Rosso is a standard, not a superiore. Okay.
When you add the caramel, you need to link to write it on the back label.
Ah, full disclosure, that's very progressive on. I would think that trying to pair the sweeter styles of vermouth with meals could be very challenging to a sommelier and a chef. It could be done, certainly you balance it off with sauces that are perhaps a bit sweeter to balance out the sugar level. And then, of course, your dish would have to have a fair amount of herbs as well to complement, I would think, the vermouths that they are drinking alongside them.
Yeah, if you use the sweet vermouth, normally you go and touch the dessert area. In Piedmont, we would think about zabaglione, to mention one.
Sure.
You do a good zabaglione sauce. I invented an ice cream with it, and it was perfectly good to be sweet. It was we did two different ice cream, by the way. Years ago, I invented also a panettone al vermouth, and this had to be with the sweet vermouth, and I did it with the storico coffee.
So I just tasted the Luigi Vico Rosso, and that is noticeably more bitter present on the palate compared to the previous couple that I've tasted. Interesting choice.
Yeah, of course, again, a traditional historical producer following their recipe. If you come new on the market, you want maybe to experiment. Maybe you want to take out of your head something different. So it's good to taste several label and try to understand what you like more. Taste can vary, but in Torino, in any way, you follow that guideline.
Yeah. Wow. It's nice to see that there is a wide range of choices being made by you and your fellow vermouth producers, your fellow vintners. That some things are more, so we say, more pronounced on the grapes. Some are more pronounced on as wine. Some are more pronounced for various types of botanicals that are in there, and some are less. Whereas people have become accustomed to the sameness of the bigger brands, and consistency is the foundation of the success of a big brand of any type of drink. The fact that these are artisan vermouths should be the key point to understanding that there's going to be great diversity of tastes, of flavors, of structures, of the various Rossos, Biancos, dries, and extra dries.
What I find important is consistency. You may choose your way, but then you need to be consistent. Don't change the recipe to a barman. Don't have vintages that every vintage you supply different taste. Barmen are the second level, and they need it to balance their own recipe, which is a cocktail. It's like a trust on certain label. That label need to deliver consistency. Doesn't matter the taste, but consistency.
Interesting. I just tasted the Antica Torino Rosso, and the same structure that informs the Bianco that I had earlier from them, or the dry. Excuse me, it's a dry. Let me double check on that. It is dry. Yes. The same structure that it's imparted in the dry is absolutely there with the Rosso. There's a house consistency between the dry and the Rosso, which links the two quite clearly. Again, it enters soft and sweet-ish, but takes over, the herbs take over very quickly, and the acidity zips in there. In a blind tasting, it sets itself very clearly apart in that regard. That's interesting. I'm no vermouth expert, not like you, and I'm not nearly as acquainted with vermouths and the protocols that are involved in tasting it. So lastly, yeah, please.
No, what is interesting to notice is that I'm not a bartender too, but the way bartender tastes vermouth is different from the way a consumer or a sommelier tastes the same product. If you put the same line, the same sheet of a sample to two different panels and ask them to give points, And you are sure that that points will be sometime quite different because they tasted with a different strategy or taste experience or simply technical use. I want my vermouth to do a Negroni. This is good, but it doesn't fit to a Negroni. This is bad, but fit to a Negroni, maybe not. You want a good Negroni, you need a good vermouth.
Speaking of which, I've just finished out my tasting with your Coque Storico, Russell. Excellent balance to this, and I can understand why you've had such great success with it. For those people still seeking to learn about what's going on here with vermouths from Torino, from Piedmont, please, once again, go to vermouthditorino.org. It's in Italian and English. Roberto and his colleagues can be found plying their wares throughout the world, as well as at their home estates and shops in Italy. Do check them out. And has a lot of amazing tastes and flavors going on here and aromas. Roberto, I thank you for your time at Drinking on the Edge, and I wish you a great 2025.
Thank you, David. There's time for another tour in Torino. I will take you bar hopping in those new bars, quite interesting, or the old ones. So Torino is now a destination for bourbon and for people who love quality and life. So I wait for you in Torino with pleasure.
Thanks. Look forward to it.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao. Thank you. Bye-bye.